Hi, Premier. Good to have you back here in studio. Thanks so much for
pleasure.
making the time. I appreciate it. You tweeted this morning that the Prime Minister committed to reach an agreement on a pipeline by mid-November. Did he tell you specifically he'd have a yes or no on what you have, come to pitch over the last week and a half by Grey Cup explicitly?
We've been talking about it for a few weeks now, and I had originally asked him if there'd be a way we could come to an agreement by the time I go to Abu Dhabi. I'll be speaking at the ADIPEC conference, which I think would be a really good platform for us to say Canada's back, Canada wants investment. But he has a time frame where he wants to have a new batch of special projects for the major projects list announced by Grey Cup, and that's the time frame that we're working towards.
So he, just so that I'm clear, because we're trying to effort to get a confirmation of that from him, he has said, because I know that's the timeline you wanted, right? And you've expressed that on multiple occasions, but he has said, I'll have an answer for you on this by then.
We'll have the framework of an agreement by Grey Cup. That's what our both of our teams are working towards. And there's a few things that we need to work out still, and that's part of the reason why we just need to do a little bit more of that discussion. Obviously, there's 9 laws that are problematic that have to be either revised or repealed in order to attract private investment. We have to come to some understanding of how we're going to get the Pathways project moved forward. It's a major decarbonization project, and also a commitment to a new revenue source, which is a bitumen pipeline, and the West Coast makes the most sense from the pipeline experts that we talk to. So that's what we've packaged up. Those are the 3 things that we need to come to an agreement on. That's what the grand bargain would be, and I'm very hopeful we'd have an announcement by Grey Cup.
Pardon me. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the other voices in the possibility or probability of that grand bargain, and specifically around David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia. You had some very, very, harsh words for him today. You called him un-Canadian in his opposition to this pipeline. Is that not going too far? I mean, can't someone have an opinion that differs than yours on what economic growth looks like in this country and still very much be a Canadian?
Well, I would just ask you to look at his video, which I think stepped over the line. I mean, it is fine to disagree. I try to find ways in which we can find common ground, and we've got lots of common ground. We've worked together on trying to advance ammonia export. I support his LNG projects. We have biodiesel that is produced in our province that is destined for the BC market, and we've talked about interties and how we would be able to support each other on that. We have a difference of opinion on this, and I do think it's unconstitutional. It has been determined by the courts that these kinds of things, trade and commerce, as well as ports and interprovincial infrastructure, are federal issues. And the reason for that is that we can't have a single parochial province blocking the aspirations of another. That's not how we were supposed to function as a country. So it is the very definition of what Canada is that we work together on these things. And so I was disappointed to hear his comments, but in the end, it's up to Mark Carney to make the decision on that. And so that's why I'm working with the Prime Minister.
And I do understand even characterizing what he said as unconstitutional because of your belief, and I think the Constitution backs it up, that this is federal jurisdiction. But calling him un-Canadian is a very specific way to describe someone who disagrees with you fundamentally on one issue around economic development. Why go that far, and what purpose does it serve?
Well, it was the whole point of why we're having the conversations that we are about tearing down internal trade barriers and finding new markets. It's because we're all facing a threat from our greatest friend and trading partner, the United States, and the instability he's created that Donald Trump has created in our relationship here. And so we have signed agreements, both among the Western premiers as well as among the national premiers, that will work together to develop economic corridors that include all of the above. It doesn't say we're going to include everything except the products produced in Alberta. And so I would say that the will of the people of Canada is that they want their leaders to work together to try to find those export markets. It's very obvious to me that the best opportunity that we have to find new markets is in Asia. And the way you get to Asia is you have to get your products to the west coast of British Columbia. And so that's the reason why we've identified that, along with those who are advising us, as the best opportunity for us to be able to develop those markets. And I would hope that he would agree and that he would work with us on it.
Do you think he's going to do that when you call him un-Canadian for presenting an opposition at this juncture?
You know, he began it, and I hope he dials his rhetoric back, because I'll be very frank about what I think of premiers who are trying to block other premiers from getting their products to market. So I would say that I think he went a little bit far yesterday. I hope he's regretting it. I know he's been ratioed quite badly on his video, which is a suggestion to me that he's not expressing the views of British Columbians. When we've done our own polling on this, we found that 75% of Canadians do want to see new pipeline access built. And there's only a couple of places that you can go when you're building new pipelines if you want to stay within Canada. One is to the East Coast, one is to the West Coast, and the West Coast just makes the most sense.
And I do understand, like, he deserves challenges over the rhetoric he's employed, and I found, listening to you in response until today, you weren't matching it in a commensurate way. You were, it sounded like, trying to dial things down and, maybe even attempt some sort of conversation. When did that switch and why?
I would just encourage you to listen to his words. And so I calibrate on the basis of that. But the main thing is, this isn't his decision. This is a decision for the Prime Minister. And the courts have affirmed that as well. So he can, I think he can maybe express his view all he wants, but he's not the ultimate decision maker. I think the decision making comes down to, does the project make sense for Canada? And it does. And we're going to be able to demonstrate that.
Do you not, though, have some empathy as someone who has so voraciously defended things that you feel are in the province's jurisdiction? If I think back, for example, to you or your predecessor, your Jason Kinney, talking about carbon pricing, even when the courts determined that that was an issue where the federal government had jurisdiction, you pushed back and said, no, I feel like this is not in the best interests of my province. David Eby, is he not, despite your disagreement with him, entitled to push back on something that he feels is not in the best interest of people who live in his province? And once again, like, why does that make him un-Canadian? It just feels very far.
He's actively trying to block our ability to access the coast. I mean, we have international law. We have international law that says one nation is not allowed to block another. It's absurd that we would have one province blocking access to another. And yes, of course, and that's how I know that it isn't his jurisdiction. The TMX pipeline was challenged by previous premiers, and the courts determined that this is federal jurisdiction for a reason. Because if we're going to operate like a country, then we have to support each other. And I'm not feeling like Premier Eby is doing that right now. I think that if we're all going to be in this together, it means that when I go south, I talk about germanium and LNG and all of the things that BC has to offer, which I do. I talk about autos, I talk about steel and aluminum, because that's what we're supposed to be doing right now if we're going to operate as a country that supports each other. And I would just like to see the same in return.
Isn't he allowed, though, to consider other interests, right?
He's
like that's what I'm saying. You're ultimately saying it's Mark Carney's decision, it's the Prime Minister's decision. So why isn't David Eby allowed to say, hey, I have these constituencies who don't feel like this is necessary. I do feel like getting rid of the tanker ban will have a negative impact on some of the investments we want to see. Like that. I can envision, if the shoes were on another foot, you doing the same thing, expressing the interests of the people of your province as you see them.
No, I've never talked about blockading this Trans-Canada Highway so trucks coming in from the BC ports can't get through my province. I've never talked
saying that?
I'm just telling you, it's the equivalent.
No,
I'm not talking about blockading the CN-CP rail line so that they can't get to BC. I'm not talking about turning off the gas pipeline that takes 5 BCF a day of BC gas through Alberta into the American markets. The whole point is that we have cross-border infrastructure that we all benefit from, and we have to make sure that we maintain that, because otherwise we aren't a real country. If we can't build cross-border infrastructure and we can't get our products to market, then we're violating what it is that the founders came together to build Canada in the first place. And so let's go back to the idea of what Canada is supposed to be. Let's get these kinds of projects built. Let's find new markets. Let's work together on that, and let's address the issues. Like, you can't. The answer isn't no. The answer is, well, here's a particular issue that we need to consider, because every single project, whether it's his copper and coal mines, or whether it's uranium, or whether it's potash, or whether it's anything else, every single thing has an issue that has to be managed. And so we manage the environmental aspects, we manage the Indigenous consultation and equity ownership. And that's actually a more responsible and grown-up way to deal with it, is let's identify the issues, let's figure out how we can manage them, and then let's move forward on working on them together. And that's what I want to do with the Prime Minister. But again, it's the Prime Minister's decision, not the Premier's.
And believe me, I wish I had the Minister of Energy here to ask him what that decision would be. You said, just to pick up on one thing you mentioned in that answer, you said last week when you made the announcement about being a proponent for the initial phase, it's a test of whether Canada works or not. And kind of in the same vein as I'm asking about labeling David Eby as un-Canadian, like, why take it to that level? And ultimately, if you're going to make that kind of threat or ultimatum, like, what happens if you get a no on this? Does that mean that Canada doesn't work? And what does that mean that you do in response?
Well, I can tell you that Albertans are questioning whether Canada works. And I'm not telling anything you don't know. There's a very active group that thinks Canada's broken. And so I suppose I could just go down to the United States and start working with American counterparts to see if we can build more pipelines. They've expressed an interest in restarting the Keystone XL. And I suppose we could maybe sell another 1 million or 2 million barrels a day additional to the United States. But I believed the premiers and I believed the Prime Minister when they said they wanted us to work like a country, that they wanted us to open new markets. And that's what I'm doing. In goodwill, I am going and building the case. That's why I was in Quebec. It's why I'm in Toronto tomorrow. It's why I'm in Ottawa. And it's why I'm going to continue traveling the country, is that when I heard my fellow premiers say that we need to start addressing issues that will allow us to work together to tear down internal trade barriers and get our products to market, this is what it looks like, is that we have hard conversations about the things we need to build. And if it doesn't work, then I guess I'll have to work with the United States. But that then is a failure, in my opinion. That's kind of is a failure of the exercise. The whole reason why we've had this recalibration in Canada in the last 8 months is because people are nervous that we are too reliant on the United States. So changing so that we become even more reliant on the United States seems to be a failure.
When you invoke the separatist sentiment, though, are you threatening in the eventuality, or the possibility rather, that this is a no, that you will throw support behind that endeavor? Like, what is it exactly that will happen if you deem Canada to be broken? And just to push back a little bit, like the construction of TMX, I know you criticize the taxpayer dollars behind that,
yeah,
but ultimately it has had a massive germane impact on the differential,
yeah,
greatly increased the amount of money coming into provincial and federal coffers,
yeah,
right? Like, it's not as though there have been no efforts on the part of other provinces or the federal government to make sure that Albertans see the economic benefit of the oil and gas that sits underneath your province. So to characterize it as such feels unfair.
We have a $6.5 billion deficit. The federal government has a $100 billion deficit. You don't eliminate that by printing money out of thin air. You eliminate that by investing in projects that build wealth. And the kind of things that build wealth are pipelines to markets that want them. If we build a 1 million barrel a day pipeline to the BC coast, that's another $20 billion a year in GDP, 40% of which goes to governments, half to the federal government and half to the provincial government. Why would we settle? Why would we settle with running nothing but deficits? Why would we settle with the problems that we have at the federal level that even the PBO is warning about is getting very dire? We've got to start finding ways to be able to build things again. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make sure that Canadians are on board and understand what that looks like, because we can't have the next 10 years be like the last 10 years. We have to build a lot more of the kinds of projects like TMX for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, my point was just that there have been some things that have been built. It's not been nothing. I just really quickly, if you don't mind, want to ask you about the teacher strike. How long are you prepared for this to go on?
Well, going on strike is part of the collective bargaining process, and the courts have determined that collective bargaining allows for that right to strike, and so we're asking the teachers to come back. We've offered them a wage increase that would make them, especially after provincial taxes, the highest in Western Canada, $115,000 a year for a 5-year educated teachers at the top of the pay scale. We've 3,000 new teachers, 1,500 new education assistants. We want to deal with complexity, and those are the things that the teachers union told us that their members wanted. Their members turned it down. So it's up to the teachers union to tell us what a new deal might look like. We've had a settlement at the table that the union has taken to their members twice. And
resoundingly rejected, though.
That's, I guess, the teachers union has to go back and find out why they're so offside with their own members.
Are you willing to engage in negotiations that might change the terms of that agreement?
We've said from the beginning to the teachers union that they've got to go find out what their members really want and come back to a table. We have to come back to the table with something. What's the point in having a third negotiated settlement that the teachers reject? I think this is a real sign that the teachers union leadership is kind of out of step with what it is that their members want. They haven't put the items on the table that will get us to a settlement, and we encourage them to do that.
Have you ruled out back to work legislation completely?
Don't have to. We'll see how it goes. I'm really hopeful that they'll actually come back to the table with something that we think we can address to get a negotiated settlement. That would be the preference.
Okay, I'll leave it on that. Premier, really appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you.